Election night in Canada, and for many, the CBC is still the network to tune into.
I think part of the reason it resonates is, unlike any other country, the need to establish an independent voice, a Canadian voice, and a national voice in a country that's so large, I think was considered a critically important function. If you look at the recent election coverage, more people came to CBC than any other place.
Very interesting evening for the Liberals.
And if the CBC's election night coverage had a somewhat gleeful tone,
the next Prime Minister of Canada will be Justin Trudeau.
It was understandable. The network has endured repeated cuts implemented by outgoing Prime Minister Steven Harper's government, whose Conservative supporters often accused the public broadcaster of a Liberal bias.
The Liberals have promised that they will increase and stabilize funding to the CBC. So that's a good sign. But it's going to take more than a Band-Aid to fix that. We started living with a bunch of Harper cuts and Harper hostility, Harper disdain, Harper ideological opposition. And so the CBC is now on the brink of ruin.
The good news is that a lot of Canadians understand the importance of what the CBC is doing, and that those people who try to harm it are swimming against the current of public opinion. So we put a lot of energy into mobilizing our support base through putting up signs, through getting petitions signed, a whole range of local activities.
The good old CBC is A-OK with me. It keeps us strong and free. It's a good old CBC.
I think it's very important to Canadians to have a CBC.
If they're lacking funding, if they don't have what they need, I do think that they should be restored.
It adds to a diverse culture that we have, and it covers every angle, I think.
It's part of our family, basically, yes.
CBC is not on the ballot, So what it really stands for is we want to demonstrate that people care enough about public broadcasting that it could become important enough to them that it would influence the way they cast their ballot.
The CBC really does hold a place in Canadian culture and identity every bit as prominent as universal healthcare or UN peacekeeping. The public broadcaster has long been respected for the balance, integrity and reach of its current affairs coverage. But like state broadcasters elsewhere, it suffered cuts and layoffs at the hands of the Conservative government, and before that, and there's a very real concern about its very survival.
But the CBC has not exactly helped itself with some high-profile conflict of interest cases. Last year, Peter Mansbridge, the chief correspondent hosting the election night coverage, and commentator Rex Murphy were outed as having been paid by the oil industry for delivering speeches.
What a wonderful thing you oil companies are!
This past June, the Toronto Star newspaper revealed another CBC news host, Evan Solomon, was using his journalistic contacts to act as a middleman in lucrative art deals. The CBC fired him. All of that followed Amanda Lang.
Welcome to The Exchange. I'm Amanda Lang.
The CBC's senior business correspondent. She got involved in a story about labour practices at RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada.
Amanda Lang was working behind the scenes to question that story, contradict it, argue, and what she did not disclose, not only had she been paid to speak at RBC-sponsored corporate events, but that she was in a long-time personal relationship with Jeff Beattie, a board member of RBC. When she was unable to alter the CBC's coverage of RBC, she then invited Gordon Nixon, the CEO of RBC, onto her own program. In, I think what we call it in the business is a softball interview. This, of course, was followed by a complete apology by RBC when the story became too true and well-founded to deny.
That story was broken back in January by Jesse Brown on his media analysis show, Canadaland. The CBC initially defended Lang. It commissioned a review into employee obligations to disclose any potential conflict of interest, but concluded Amanda Lang's journalism adhered to CBC's journalistic standards.
Meanwhile, the show will go on.
9 months later, Lang has just left the network that defended her.
We rely on our journalists to recognize when there may be a real perceived or potential conflict, and for them to disclose that. And Amanda herself, I think, has commented on that and said, in retrospect, she didn't feel the relationship was serious enough or had been long-term enough to merit a disclosure. Obviously, it's not something that you ever like to see or have to deal with, but they do present an opportunity to say, do we need to have another conversation? Should we have a reset around this issue? And I think we've done that.
Conflict of interest at the CBC has been something that has evolved in lockstep with the emergence of a celebrity culture.
My name's Peter Mansbridge.
And the CBC has seen this happen to a certain extent as part of the overall decline in the place. The constraints on budget, the pressures on the CBC from the political level has caused the CBC to have to rely increasingly on the credibility, the high profile, the celebrity of certain people who work there.
The awful irony for those of us who care about the CBC and believe in public broadcasting is that a lot of these self-inflicted wounds directly occur as a result of funding cuts. The CBC pursued a more commercial path because they were getting less and less money from the government. As a result of pursuing that more commercial path, they became enamored with celebrity and they had these horrible scandals. As a result of the scandals, they're now in a poor position to advocate for themselves as a public broadcaster that covers the news. Everything that happens leads to the same conclusion from government, which is let's give the CBC less.
It's a vicious circle. After 2 decades of cuts, Canada's remaining financial support to the CBC, as a percentage of GDP, is far less than what other countries spend on their public broadcasters. But Justin Trudeau, who takes office this week, has vowed to change that.
The Liberal Party made a major announcement about the CBC and culture, which involved investing new money in the CBC.
A new Liberal government will invest $150 million in new annual funding for the CBC.
The words are good, only deeds matter. So in the competition for resources, it will be very, very important to push that new government to do what it has promised to do.
I'm very optimistic. The thing that you have as a public broadcaster is the mission to inform, enlighten, and entertain, and the differentiation that that gives you. And in a world of 200 or 300 or 400 media brands that audiences are looking at, to stand out, to have 70+% support from the Canadian public positions us so well for the future.
Thanks for coming in. Appreciate it. Got a lot to cover.
And that future is now all about Justin Trudeau. He showed the CBC plenty of support during the election campaign.
We need to make sure that CBC has strong, stable, predictable, long-term funding that is sufficient for it to fulfill its mandate moving forward of empowering and informing Canadians and celebrating the extraordinariness of this country.
Now the network and the Canadians who back it want Trudeau to show them the money, so the CBC can get on with the job.